Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
In her eye-opening feature film debut, A Dangerous Idea, Eugenics, Genetics, and the American Dream, filmmaker Stephanie Welch effectively brings to light how false scientific claims have rolled back long fought for gains in equality and how powerful interests are poised once again to use the gene myth to unravel the American dream. It's an impactful movie, and everyone needs to see it. And we're really excited to have Stephanie join us here on Big Blend Radio today to talk about her film, A Dangerous Idea, and how it deals with the interconnections of complex topics within the arena of science, history, and politics. Now, Stephanie is a documentarian and executive director of Paragon Media, a nonprofit media organization that is the co-producer of A Dangerous Idea. And she's also the senior producer of the award-winning syndicated program Pioneers Radio, Revolution from the Heart of Nature. She co-produced the radio documentary BioWars, First Do No Harm, which won an NFCB Silver Reel Award. And she's also the audio engineer for Women's Rising Radio.
Cool.
That's a lot to talk about.
Wow.
She's done a lot. And she's going. And, very excited about this being out now. It opened in theaters today. A Dangerous Idea opened in theaters today in New York and will be available on VOD and DVD starting October 2nd. You can go to the website adangerousideafilm.com, and it features Van Jones and Robert Reich. So check it out. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Hey, excited. I just want to sit and read like your long resume before you come on here. But it's impressive. What led you to do A Dangerous Idea and make this into a movie and cover, eugenics versus genetics? And we should touch on that so people know, because it's
the difference.
Watching your film, I'm like, oh my gosh, this resonates with things that have been said here, done here in my life, and just it's like, wow, this is this evil cycle that keeps going round and round. But I didn't know there was the name eugenics. That was new to me. I knew about genetics, and apparently not everything that I needed to know. But if you could touch on eugenics versus genetics, and then why you decided I'm going to make a movie on this.
Sure, yes. I mean, it's interesting because in our research, when we were looking at genetics generally and historically, that's the word that was being used. I think it was 1909 or something. That was the gene, 1907 or so. Genetics came about. And then eugenics was simultaneously introduced as a concept back then as well. So it sort of paralleled each other. But genetics was, very much the focus was on looking at heredity and looking at how humans pass on traits to one another, physical traits and all that. And then, of course, eugenics sort of expanded that into the personality traits and characteristics, and even things that we might consider social traits like alcoholism or something like that, or now looked at as a disease, but or poverty and things like that. So they were sort of the terms came up around the same time, which was interesting, or got popularized then. And then by the mid-50s, when DNA, when Watson and Crick and everyone was looking at DNA as the potential mechanism for heredity in the world of genetics, and after World War II, basically they switched it, and journals that had used the word eugenics changed their name to include genetics. So there's a very interesting history because of the baggage that came along with the word eugenics after World War II. They just didn't want to be associated with it. So they're very much related, but I mean, I would say that there are a lot of scientists who don't necessarily, believe that all of our characteristics are passed on hereditarily in terms of our personalities and things like that. And eugenics is just basically the notion that these things are passed on hereditarily, and that there are some people who are born superior and others who are born inferior with certain traits, and that some people shouldn't reproduce as a result of that, to reproduce these things in our society.
Wow, it's crazy. And
That is
when
so
did you first
mind-blowing.
hear about this and say, okay, I'm going to make a movie on this? Because even this, genetics, eugenics, it's like, let's confuse the population on this.
Yes.
It's kind of like how Monsanto's not Monsanto anymore.
Right, I know.
And they're tied into this
they
too. I
disappeared.
was like, dude, this is so this is hugely connected on so many levels that it's crazy. When I saw the Monsanto conversation, I was like in there and I was like, oh, this is really all tied up into our food, into even how we're getting, medicine, how it's tied into everything, life and death included. So yeah, but when was the first thing for you to say, hey, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, so our my filmmaker colleagues and I were working on the project when we first began. That it was focused on agriculture. The Cornerstone Campaign, which is one of the main other producers of the film, they're very much focused on biotechnology and looking at the bad science around biotech and agriculture. And then we expanded into medicine, and we're looking at ways in which the gene concept and this whole notion of genes have been changing since the Human Genome Project. So that sort of prompted our inquiry back in 2004, 2005. And then, and Andrew Kimbrell, Mary Morgan, they're the other, and the producers involved and the filmmakers. So once we began exploring all of that, we kept coming across eugenics history, and Andy had written in a book, Human Body Shop, which is about the quantification of body parts, basically the quantification of human beings, looking at organ to organ transfers, things like that. He had covered some eugenics, but he himself said, this is a real interesting way to tell the story, and a horrifying part of our past that people need to know about, and how the gene concept itself was really at the basis of eugenics in a way that he hadn't really realized, and that we felt was a great way to be able to tell the story about the gene and how there's really no real science behind it, in our view, in the way that we've conceived of it, Mendelian genetics, passing on traits in this way. So we shifted everything from agriculture and medicine and just said, this is the story we want to tell. So that took us like the last 5 years.
But it is tied together.
To get that together. Yeah, and they're all interrelated, definitely.
Wow, and this is crazy because when you think about when genetically engineered or, GMO, I mean, it's like everybody, let's all get confused on that too, but I think we're getting it now. It was, let's be able to mass produce food because people can't afford to do this. And it's kind of like, we're going to, here, and yet we're going to, destroy our soil. We're going to chemicalize you. And if it's to people who don't have enough money, you're basically, it's the same thing. They'll put up a chemical waste plant right next to a low-income neighborhood because it's not the la-di-da people. You know what I mean? There's that thing that has happened in our history for years. And it's like, okay, if you're low income, then they don't know people's stories. And that's where I think is very interesting when you look at this, where it's like, okay, if you're a woman, I mean, women, race and women, I mean, when did we start to say we're minority? Who started the minority thing? It's the same thing, isn't it? Like,
I know. I mean, yeah, it's interesting that we're 51% of the human population.
But we're a minority.
Sort of shuffle that into the. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that the all of these categories, and I think that's what we talk a little bit about. Our framing is really around this notion of the American dream, and that women and people of color and everybody we're all one big family here. Everyone considered equal. And of course, we know that history to be not the case in terms of the way people have been treated from the very, very beginning. And so we're looking at this conflict. If you believe in the science of genes as we've been taught it, if you believe that traits are passed on, personality, intelligence, and all these sorts of things are passed on through our DNA or through genes, we show that the science isn't there. But even if you believe that and think that the science will eventually be there, you really only have one conclusion from that point, which is that means that you can't have equality, like as we've envisioned it here in the United States. So we found that to be the major conflict that we wanted to address, and especially for progressives or people who care about equality in this march toward progress that we've been carrying on for so many decades. You know, how does that affect us? And so we explore those things in the film.
One of the parts in the film, and I loved how you brought in, you know, Nixon saying some of like his documented, like, here's what he said. He's there. You can hear his voice saying these things. You brought in all these historical references, and I love the work you've done on these old historic photos. It reminds me of, like, didn't Nana do that, Nancy? Where
she worked for, my grandmother worked for Kodak and painted. She took black and white photos, and she had a set of paints, and she painted in the colors so they could now have color photographs.
Yeah.
And so it was very artistic what she managed to do.
But you have that in your movie.
Wonderful.
Like, it's the same thing with the historic photos.
And I was like, I remember her little things of paint.
Yeah.
You know, and her idea, she's very artistic, but never sold paintings. Like, she didn't get a canvas and paint a picture. She would just do color photos. And I just, you know, I grew up when there were color photos.
Yeah,
you know?
and so that's what you really gave a sense of place to history of, you know, the historic images and imagery and in the footage. You just have a really good sense of place that I think is going to ring a lot of bells for people. There was one part of their showing, there was a discussion on, I think there was a people of color in Africa. They were talking about, I think it was a African person's brain is different, or their bones are different. And this is exactly what happened to me in high school. No, I wasn't even in high school yet. In South Africa. And I had a really evil teacher that actually hit the student. One student smashed his head into the desk and everything. He was an evil teacher. Mr. Vikstrom, I can say your name out there on air because you're evil. I hope you don't have a job anymore. Anyway, he was horrible. He was horrible to women. If it was that time of month for a girl, we must have been in high school. He just, you know, there's no such thing of going through any, you know, pain or anything. And one girl just said, you know, he acted as though you wouldn't have that going on. And one girl just says, here, I'm going to take my pants down right now and show you. That's exactly how bad he was. But one class, he sat telling us, we had a lecture. This was his class. He lectured us. And this is I think I graduated was the last year when we were not mixed in schools. And so if you were in a private school, then everyone had, you know, if you had money, you know, white, black, Indians, you're all together. But in that day, it was like, if even the Dutch were separated, you had your Dutch school and then your English speaking school. And it was just, you didn't have the different African tribes in there, you know, so it was this interesting thing. But if you were a Greek or Chinese or Portuguese, you're allowed in. Just saying, this is what it was. But anyway, this one class, he stood up and started telling us that black people can't swim because of their bone density.
It's too heavy.
And that their brain had these huge fissures, so they will never be able to take in the knowledge as white people could. And your film covered a little bit of this, and it freaked me out. I was like, because I'm going, God, I know a bunch of, you know, black people who are smarter than me, man, you know, and know how to do things. And I know people who can swim, you know, like, what the hell is he talking about? As a kid, I was like, no, you're wrong. But how many people took that in, you know, and believed it?
Exactly. And you remembered it, you know, when you saw it here, it rang a bell for you from, I mean, the history is ridiculous when you look back, and these were the people making the claims like this. I mean, we're talking about the United States, at least, were Harvard educated, you know, Yale, all these big schools, Ivy League, you know, the most prominent scientists were involved in this. And that's something that I showed across the board. It was on all political parts of the spectrum, you know, left, right, and center, and very prominent people believed in all this. One of the things that we cover, like you're talking about with the claims that Native Americans and Africans had smaller brains, they were trying to say that it was associated with intelligence. And then for women, they said, oh, you know, you shouldn't get involved in higher learning because it'll draw energy from the ovaries into your brain, and you'll become barren and won't be able to have children. I mean, things like that, you know. And of course, over and over again, many of these claims, blood, skull size, all these things are eventually, accepted as ridiculous. And we think that the same thing will happen with DNA and genes and all of this eventually, if we're lucky. People will see that there's no proof that any of these types of things are set and determined by heredity or anything else. And there's plenty of evidence to the contrary that our environment and our opportunities are what really allow us to become who we are.
That's right.
I think, when things are written in stone, as it were, like I'm going to go to fossils now, of you find a fossil and it's 30 million years or whatever years old, and it becomes, oh no, now this is where this began. Well, until somebody finds an older fossil. We don't know. We don't know. I'm just thinking about the hummingbird. The hummingbird fossil is in Europe, and Europe doesn't have any hummingbirds. But we have hummingbirds over here. So I'm just saying that this is what we know today. Don't draw conclusions. Just don't. But I think scientists have this in order to get grants and funding, we have to draw conclusions. Well, you can't, because you don't know until somebody proves or disproves your findings. So if somebody goes out and finds another hummingbird fossil, it's going to change the whole parameter of the hummingbird being the oldest whatever fossil. It's nuts. It's crazy. We just don't know.
Yeah, there's so many things that we think we know, and that's one thing that's exciting that we found is that for young people getting into science right now, and saying, and when I was a kid, I basically believed that they had it all figured out. We know exactly how heredity works, we know how evolution works, and all that, and we found none of this is true. Now we know a lot about small things and intricate small details, but the big picture is not clear yet, and maybe never will be, who knows. But for young people going in right now, it's a really exciting time, and this is a pro-science film. We're very much about the point that we're making is that what's happening, why aren't we asking the questions about the science now that we have these results from the Human Genome Project and all these clues as to how our assumptions are wrong, and it's just not being talked about in any honest way, because there are a lot of reasons for that. Ideological reasons, and also money. There's a ton of money going into the concept of the gene in terms of medicine, biotech, and also, I think with gene therapy and also crops and these sorts of things. They can do these small tricks with DNA, and then we're talking about super babies or something.
Exactly. We're going to create our own baby. And this is so funny. I was laughing today because, we watched your film, so we were watching it on my computer. Facebook ad pops up, right? This is just how we are now, right?
Yeah.
And I got a Facebook ad this morning saying, "Eat according to your DNA," and I went, "Are you kidding me? We are going to fix a diet." And I'm like, "Listen, how do you know about my spare tire around my waist? Like, you don't know." And that's not nothing. My family's skinny compared to me. What are you talking about? So it's like, it's interesting. An awkward thing, like, oh my gosh. And so the advertising world and companies start up on this when we have a family history expert, Holly, that comes on our show. From Family History Expos, and she goes, we just did a show with her on family history and traveling to find your ancestors. So you're going to graveyards, to churches, to look at the records and everything. And one of our guests on there said, "Oh, I'm doing my DNA. I can't wait. And I just found out this about that." And she says, you know what? You can do all the DNA you want, and you're going to find out. You're going to do a DNA test somewhere else. It'll be different. And basically, you have to do the paper trail and see what you can find in the hardcore evidence versus this DNA test that you even do. And I think you can find some out, but what I'm seeing with people with these DNA tests and everything, that everyone has data that's different. I don't know how accurate those are even. It's really kind of, it's something that we wish we hadn't gotten into in more detail, but Augustine Fuentes, if you look him up, there's a great web, what's it called? Not a webinar, I guess a web debate between Augustine Fuentes and Nicholas Wade. And I hope it's still up there. I looked recently and I couldn't find it, but
but I may have been. So yeah, look that up, and I can send you the link for your website if you want once I find it. But it's a great debate about the findings around DNA and this notion of race and the notion of ancestry and how much it can tell you. And basically, Augustine's point is that, data is coming in based on the notion that there are already groups of people that can be designated. And so in a lot of the software, you can actually sort. If you wanted to say there are 22 groups, the data will be sorted into 22 groups. If you want to say 300 or if you want to say 5. So it's very interesting, as they database. Pull the database in, they're already assigning characteristics of those people to that DNA or those markers. And there are no, what he says in the film, there are no unique markers that would, for any group of people, that would warrant the kinds of claims that we're getting about this stuff. So, and it gets kind of technical, but it's also about mitochondrial DNA. So it's just your mother's side and not your father's side. And we're all really related at some point eventually anyway. So how far back can you really go? And it's really, now you can't tell who your father is and your mother. I mean, let's be clear. You can definitely, if you have the DNA of your relatives and yourself, there are unique markers that are pretty, unique, but we're talking about ancestors and place, what country you're from, what region, and all that kind of thing.
That was so interesting because at the end of, watching A Dangerous Idea, I'm like, okay, so everybody in the back then is like, okay, if you're of this race, okay, like basically you're dumb. And that's, you're feeble-minded as was said. And like, I was getting mad at that. But, when I'm going, okay, so now listen, pretty much majority of us have all intermixed in some way or form somewhere in our gene pool and lifelines, right? So at this point, we're all feeble-minded now. That's it. And even the people who believe in it, guess what? You're going to be feeble-minded too. So that's what I have to say about it. So we're all feeble-minded. And if we start pointing fingers, I think Van Jones had it dead on when he was talking about it. Are we going to, we're either going to crumble ourselves or we're going to unite. We're kind of getting to that grouping of it. What really freaked us, what was Margaret Sanger doing believing in all this? Like, that's crazy. What was she? I know.
Doing? I mean, it was a great example, and we were trying to figure out who to include there because there's so many people that would surprise you. Jack London, these different, but it was very much accepted at the time. It's hard to find. We had a difficult time really finding any detractors at that time. Even scientists. There were some scientists like Morgan who was saying, well, we don't have the mechanism yet, so we shouldn't make claims like this. But he wasn't necessarily against the larger concept of eugenics. People just accepted it as if it were true, and it was very convenient at the time because it was the Gilded Age when it came about, and they were trying to justify the inequality that they were seeing. So it was much easier to blame poverty on people's bad genes than it was to actually pay them a living wage, Wow. And that's where we find today. We're warning that these kinds of things start coming up. The more inequality increases, like we're seeing today. They're calling today the second Gilded Age, of course. You see the similar types of biological claims coming out. And with the Trump administration right now talking about Mexicans as criminals, they said the same thing back at the turn of the century, Oh
yeah, they're not bringing the good ones in, We live on the border here in Tucson, and
we've actually lived in Mexico. And we've lived in Kenya, we've lived in England, we lived in South Africa, and I just want to make the blanket statement, what a bunch of BS.
About the eugenics. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's person by person by person.
Yeah.
I don't want to be blanketed in with every woman on earth.
How did Oprah become Superwoman? Yeah, if eugenics was true, right?
Exactly.
But this
we do know Black people who swim.
Yes. And win races and
so
get into the Olympics, right?
Yeah, so it's like, wow, how'd you do that? You're not supposed to be able to.
But things like this, when you look at, they were talking about this thing about animals not having emotion and animals being lower than human beings.
I don't like that either.
But there was a documentary that this came from one dude who sat there and got, oh man, I wish I could remember the whole story. But this guy just wrote this thing one day and everybody believed it. And
it's really amazing, how
and it was way back in the same time,
and no proof,
no proof
at all.
And then everyone starts to believe it,
Well, we were joking around because some of the studies, if you really look closely, if you start digging up the studies upon which these gene claims are based, like, for instance, infidelity. They claim to have found the infidelity gene. And so we looked it up, and it turns out that the whole study was based on prairie voles, like little, like gopher creatures, and they decided that they'd extrapolate it, put on the cover of Time magazine. This is the kind of nonsense that's coming out. Most of it coming from a psychologist and not geneticists, really.
We're going to go to a vole and not a man.
Yeah. So
really?
this is it. But this is what is really, really, really crazy, and I don't think the majority of Americans know. And I think everyone needs to know about the sterilization thing that happened.
I was shocked.
That, and I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of women and men that were sterilized at a young age so they wouldn't reproduce.
What? Yes, we had heard about, in many of the history books, well, not enough probably, but many of them do talk about the pre-war, or I should say, before 1950, and talk about 60 to 80,000 people in the United States who were sterilized under our laws here, state laws. Whereas we kept digging, and some of an interviewee that we talked to, Jay Joseph, informed us about this Nixon era time, or the 4 to 6 years around the time of Nixon and moving forward. There were, almost 500,000 people who were counted in an investigation that had been sterilized either through coercion, without their knowledge, or or just forced. They were just told that they would have to die. I guess that would be coercion, when saying they'll take away their benefits and things like that if they didn't get sterilized. And we looked into it and found that it wasn't like it was back in the day when these were states making decisions and forcing people. These were clinics across the country who had been given permission by the Nixon administration to use federal funds, for poor people who didn't have the money to be able to choose sterilization if they chose. Now, of course, that's a good thing to be able to offer people. But what the Nixon administration hadn't done was provided guidelines as to how to go about that. So in other words, no one under 18 should be sterilized even with parental permission. I can't remember exactly how they said it, but it was, about fully informed and no coercion, completely the choice of the person coming in there. Those guidelines were never sent, and we cover this in detail in the film, and there were hearings about it, and the guidelines ended up in a warehouse, and they never distributed them. And our producer, Andy Kimbrell, he looked into this, and he found a quote from the Nixon administration. I can't remember exactly who from there said it suited our purposes. To suppress the guidelines.
The budget thing, we're going to use this budget over here. Look like we're doing something over here, but it's so weird, because at the time when you think about that era, right, here comes also hey, we want to be able to take care of our bodies as women, right? And so it's almost like the same people who are anti women's rights for abortion, or look at Planned Parenthood, right? This whole war going on.
Birth control.
But hey, we're just going to go and snip. There goes your fallopian tubes or whatever. If you're a dude, that's going to happen too. Mostly women, it looks like. But it's like you're anti-abortion, but we're just going to play snip. So it to me, this whole thing seems like there's this upper echelon, and I'm going to say male a lot, but then there were women into it too. So like, I'm still pissy about Margaret Sanger, but but it's these hierarchies up there going, okay, we're going to control the masses. It's like they're playing God, and they're using Darwinism, which is wrong, because even they manipulated Darwinism. I think Darwin had some valid things. We do change. Look at our thumbs and our little pinky fingers and pinky toes. So there's parts of
you do evolve, but he was natural. The word being natural selection, not human selection.
We're going to snip your fallopian tube.
It was natural. In the animal world, it was who ran the fastest, who hunted the best. Was natural. Well,
now they're finding, the more they're looking into, and another thing we wish we'd gotten into, the people who have claimed to understand how the evolutionary process works, and like you said, I mean, there's some obvious things where things are evolving in a way, but the mechanism for that is now a mystery again, because they claim that DNA changes must be where these things were taking place. And now that can't be true, because they can't even point to a single gene in which that's happening in any, major way. I mean, there may be some sorts of a wing or an enzyme change here, but when they're talking about major traits, there's no proof that they've got that figured out. Doesn't mean they won't, again,
right?
But they don't. And I think, people could look into the Evo, it's called the Evo-Devo movement, and a lot of people really looking at how cooperation is really where things evolve in ways that are beneficial versus competition. And Darwin himself was actually a social Darwinist, even though he's not ever put in that category, and Herbert Spencer and these others are usually nailed for that. But, if you read The Descent of Man, he really did apply this to humans and, said that people shouldn't have children who have traits that they don't want to pass on. And so he was a believer in that way and didn't really push eugenics in any way that was like, we should sterilize people or anything like that I've come across. But he definitely believed in inferior races. He believed that the colonialists, the white colonialists were winning, and that was a good thing, because he felt like there were some groups that weren't really up to snuff from the human. So there's a lot of Darwin stuff there that people should check out. And Descent of Man is a good way to.
But that was the thought process at that time. I mean, you have to realize when you go back that far, the education level wasn't what it is today. They didn't have the wherewithal that we have now. And they really didn't. And so I get it. I'm not excusing that. I'm just saying, I guess that people draw conclusions a little bit too early sometimes. And that seems to be a scientific thing, so you can get grants. I'm saying.
I know she's into that, but at the same time, if you also look at over the years, we haven't been having as many children as we typically did in society, because we're not. The farm, because this is where agriculture takes in. Because farming is now, machines more machines than there are the family going out. And it used to be have enough kids for your workforce too.
5 or 6 kids so they could work the farm. Yeah.
And now we don't need anybody to work the farm.
We need a tractor.
You need the really big things, and then the big things come and spray things above you, and cough, sneeze.
It's so interesting that the humans are replacing themselves in the workplace by inventing things to make things convenient, which gets rid of us. It's so weird that
but it's how you use it.
Of self-destruction.
But it's how you utilize it, and so are you going? It's part of that change. Things are going to always change, but it's how we as individuals choose to.
Who's going to be left? I mean, if we're replaced by machines and robots,
I don't know. Margaret Sanger's going to run.
Artificial intelligence, all these things. We're replacing ourselves to make things more economic for an economy that we're not going to be around to see.
Wow.
I don't know. I'm saying it.
Man. All right.
Well, so, one thing I wanted to also mention, because it was an important, because we're talking about history a lot. Yeah. And of course the Trump, and then we did mention the Trump administration, this current attitude toward immigrants, which there was legislation in 1924 that barred certain immigrants from coming into the country based on racial origin and this kind of stuff. Right. And it got turned around by Johnson in the Great Society years. But today we also have there's a young man in the film, if you remember, Stephen Thomas, whose family sued. And this is seems like a complete non sequitur, but his family sued the lead pigment industry because of him. He was poisoned, and he had to go through chelation therapy, and it caused some damage for learning disabilities and things like that. So they sued the industry, and the industry decided that their defense, they called it the gene defense, their primary defense. They used all sorts of tricks to try to get the jury to go against him, in the family. But they said that it wasn't the lead. Even if he had been poisoned, they were saying he would have been nothing anyhow. They already had a racist attitude and toward someone who's poor. that they said that he was genetically unintelligent, and that if they could look at, all you have to do is look at the report cards, which they dug up from family members. They did, they looked up IQ tests that their parents had taken that they could dig up somewhere, and they got a woman to testify who we highlight in the film, if you remember, Nancy Heben, who claims that, yes, it looks like, that this is the case, that these things were passed on hereditarily. No proof that we know now. There's zero proof of any sort of thing like that.
How does a woman? That's what's weird to me. Okay, so talk about genetics. That's what Nancy and I are going, okay, women have that, okay, so parts is we do have that nurturing motherly thing, right?
Well, you need
how do you
as
a woman,
a child, you have to
how do you do that? That woman was evil, man. When she was sitting up there and just so like, how, you're putting this family through, you're killing them. You're killing them, literally. And that is what's so insane about this. This is life or death. What happened with that woman saying, okay, these kids basically didn't pass enough, they didn't get A's, so therefore, hey, we think they're stupid, so it doesn't matter. They could live in the lead zone.
There's so many people who believe that if you are living in a poverty area, that you chose it. Mm-hmm. And, and it's a crazy thing where, we learned this in Africa where when people are struggling, they struggle together. And yes, it's a slow process, but they do actually lift each other together. In the Western societies, it's like, oh, well, you must have done something wrong. There's this like
stigma.
I always think of it as the overlord plantation owner syndrome of, we have money, so we're better than you. And that really is not the case. You may have inherited, but that doesn't mean you know anything or you're better than anybody, that you're a better person. It means that you inherited money.
Right. And like Trump says, oh yeah, it was we have him in the film saying, yeah, I think my genes are part of my success, when, his father loaned him $1 million for his
well, that's like
where your orange hair.
And let's go into his grandfather then. Is he going to talk about, being a pimp? So just saying. if you want to play that argument,
what we try to emphasize too is that what we're seeing now is a backdoor eugenics, a new eugenics that wouldn't be called that except for the fact that it has similar results, which is, like you said, people are being blamed for their own conditions, poverty, that for whatever reason, and the government, has taken, since the Great Society, has slashed programs that assist people in this very unequal economy. That would allow them, the safety net, as they call it, slashed it so much so that people are really, really desperate and destitute now. And as we see, there are actual numbers that people have looked at in studies showing that death is a result of this kind of destitution and this kind of lack of health care and all the things that we know people need to be able to survive. So we basically are saying there's a backdoor eugenics program in the United States that we would call that by any other name if we were paying attention and looking at it from that perspective. And many, across the board, Democrats and Republicans both have done these slashes to programs.
Absolutely.
It is that. And I'm personally tired of the two parties. I'm like, can we have a new one, please?
It's called common sense.
Yeah, I know. The common sense party would be nice. Common sense and compassion. This is the thing too. I think your movie is really, when I say eye-opening, it's impactful. It makes you think. I mean, here I was, a kid in South Africa, listening to the effects of that history that came out of this country. I was thinking about it like Australia. In South Africa, and and Australia and South Africa are very close buddies, in a lot of, vacations, all that kind of stuff, and being close to each other and everything. But, I don't know if you've heard this, how, because of how Australia was founded with, hey, we're going to take our criminals, which were probably petty, theft and whatever, bring them over to an island, dump them there, and now we're going to call everybody is a criminal from Australia. I mean, it's just that same mentality, judgmental mentality, and so to me, just going, oh my gosh, this was here in this country for a long time, and I'm like feeling the effects over in Africa in the mid 80s, but I'm so young now. But how this spreads out and it becomes part of people's makeup, like their spiel. They think this, they're brainwashed into it almost, because this is what has been said and done, and families start to believe it, and it gets passed on to their kids. And until we see something like this, and you see the actual history, and you see some of these scientists speak, and that this is real. Like this isn't this is real, and it's crazy. And then you think about Hitler taking this. So when you think about that, when you brought that in, I'm like, this is huge. And right now, the way this country is so divided. I think that your movie is so very important, and I hope every person in this country and around the world sees it, because it's not just impacting this country. I know for a personal fact it isn't, and I hope it goes around everywhere, because at the end of the day, it is about the rich or poor. It's not necessarily about color. It's about rich or poor, but there's color, definitely. There's that, but it is about this thing. And
especially in Europe right now, I mean, the rise of the rise of white nationalist parties and all the white supremacists, the marches. I mean, the political organizing, the fact that they're in power in some parliaments. I mean, it is really, really. I would say it's predictable to a certain extent, and that's what we try to show. Is every there are these waves of this type of thing that happen if we don't guard against it. And when you have the dominant paradigm and government and sort of people in power supporting phony science or pseudoscience like we have here, and like you said, people just, that's what they've been taught and that's what they believe. And if you come to them with a different analysis like this, they think you're crazy,
Yeah.
But it's a real cautionary tale.
I don't even think it's what they believe. I think it's what works best for them on a personal basis. I really do. I think people are so insecure that they're going to go where it suits them the best and believe what suits them, whether or not they really truly believe it. I mean, I get there might be some people who are easily convinced or brainwashed or whatever you want to call it, but I think that we are animals and we act in animal fashion, even though we're supposed to be smarter. We act in animal fashion, and if you think you're going to be attacked, you attack first or you run. But I think there's a huge, across the world leaders are insecure because they know how they got to be world leaders and pretty much don't deserve to be there.
Their foundation is getting
in other
changed.
words, they stepped on people. They have plundered, pillaged, and to get there, they don't deserve to be there, and the onus is on the citizens of the world to not let that keep happening.
And I think change is happening. Look at how many women just won all these races. I mean, look how many women are up in.
Well, it's about time.
I mean, there are some positive things happening, and you got to look at that. I mean, people are marching, people are doing things. But I think, again, knowledge is power, and you just put the knowledge out there. Everyone needs to. Is this going to go on Netflix? It needs to be on Netflix.
Yeah.
Well, the DVD and the VOD, that's coming out. The video on demand will be out October 2nd. And we were just told, I want to make sure I have this right because we've been trying to find out. So it's going to be on Amazon Prime, Google Play, Microsoft, and iTunes.
Okay.
So I don't see Netflix on there. And, interestingly, Netflix and a couple other companies are really shifting to do a lot of their own stuff that they generate themselves. So they're moving away from getting a lot of documentaries. I mean, I would love to be on there, of course. But yeah, people will be able to go on October 2nd to Amazon Prime, Google Play, iTunes, and Microsoft. And we'll be selling DVDs on our website as well, which I should give you that, I guess, before it's too late. A
dangerousideafilm.com. Everyone, a dangerous film. A dangerousideafilm.com. It's a dangerous film, and that'll open your eyes and make you realize some things that are real, and you should check out. Thank you for doing this. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for that.
Thank you so much.
Really, it's an important. And I'm so glad about the world of documentaries.
I know. It's a great time. It's a great time for them.
We got to use it while we can.
There's so many good ones out. I can't even keep up on all of the ones that I want to see. There's just so many good ones and so many good films generally. Also, I don't know, I think you had mentioned at the beginning, we're at Cinema Village this week, starting, Friday night's our premiere, which is, we'd love everybody to come in on Friday night and fill the house. It always has a good start, good energy when we fill on Friday night, and it goes through Thursday. So we're running during the day, like 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, that kind of thing. So you can go to Cinema Village website, get advance tickets, and we'd love to see you there. And we'll have Q&As on the weekends. I'm going to try to stick around all week, but definitely on the weekends, we'll be there to talk and answer questions, I think. So really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your audience.
Thank you. And I think our audience is going to really thank you for doing this. And just, again, eye-opening, mind-blowing, impactful, educational, informative. Once you've watched this, it's going to change minds. I really believe that. And be eye-opening that people go, okay, now, we don't need to do things like Charlottesville,
Well, I want to ask a question before you go. When are you making another one?
Yeah, you need to just keep doing that on and on and on.
I'd love to. It's just so fascinating, this topic. We, like I said, we started the medicine film, so I think that's where I'd like to put some energy. And if people are interested, I can definitely keep in touch about some short clips and things that we'll be putting out in advance of that. But yeah, a film focused on really where genetics lies, the biotech industry, the history of biotech, and how this gene myth has driven all the medicine and research into the wrong direction in our view. So that will be next, I hope.
Cool. Yeah. Keep us posted. Yeah. Man, we're fans. We're big fans of this. So of your work.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Everyone, again, A Dangerous Idea. Film.com. Go see it in New York, or see it on demand, or video on demand, DVD. Go get the DVD. The holidays are coming up, so when you have to go and see the entire family and the other side, the Uncle Joes,
give them all one.
All one and say, here's my Christmas present, because you may need to watch this, or maybe you should do it at Thanksgiving, so by the time you have to see them at Christmas, the drama's over, because now it's like, that's it. They can't say anything ever again. It's done. Just saying.
That's a great idea. I love it.
I know. I agree. Everyone, thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Go to bigblendradio.com. Our shows air Sunday through Friday. You can listen to the shows as they go live, or anytime later on demand. We're on Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud, everywhere. Just go check it out there on bigblendradio.com. And we got a special song from New York, right? We had to do that. From one of our favorite musicians, Kwame Benet and the Shakedown. The Shakedown, they all rock.
Are you ready?
They rock Harlem big time. Their latest album is Roots, Rock, and Universal Love, also put out with Vernon Reid, the great Vernon Reid. He's got a brand new EP coming out. I do hear. I know there's a new single, so I know a new album, new EP is coming out soon. But this is from Roots, Rock, and Universal Love. It's called World on Fire. There's not a better song for this segment. So enjoy and keep up with Kwame at KwameBenetShakedown.com. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure, Stephanie.
Thank you so much.
This isn't heaven.